Okay, calm down.
Again, just to restate why this is a matter of interest at the moment in May of 2023, it's not because I'm going to claim to have like the most encyclopedic knowledge of every little aspect of the JFK assassination. There are people who have spent decades immersed in the minutia of it. And yes, there is evidence that's come out through documents that have been ridiculously concealed forever, showing that there could have been, that there clearly was some interfacing between, for example, Oswald and this CIA exile front group that the CIA was involved in funding. And that's, of course, a legitimate line of inquiry. But whatever ambiguities exist there, or whatever information might have been concealed there, it doesn't, number one, lead to some retroactive endorsement of the Warren Commission as like this fount of wisdom, but more importantly, it doesn't also lead to this incredibly unsupportable, grandiose reinterpretation of the Kennedy dynasty as this, mythical warriors against the deep state, when they're the ones who utilized the deep state to advance their own designs through assassinations, through escalation dramatically in Vietnam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest buildup militarily in U.S. history that had ever existed at that point, increasing the CIA budget radically, all that gets reframed as part of this secret plan that the Kennedys have, which we're now seeing manifest again magically today through the personage of RFK Jr., who wants us to believe this mythical interpretation of history, because then we'll know that we have to put our hopes onto him to counter the deep state. Well, no, I think what you're doing there is actually not countering the deep state, but promoting a certain credulity and irrationality and paranoia that is the antithesis of actually combating the deep state. And if anything, is precisely what the deep state wants, because it shows that their most ardent critics are actually mired in this sort of delusional hallucinatory thinking.
Well, once Kennedy gets killed, you do have an unleashing of the military. Kennedy had avoided going to war in Laos, Berlin, and Cuba twice, and Vietnam repeatedly, refused to actually start a hot war. And he also restrained the CIA in a number of areas. None of the crazy overthrows really happened under Kennedy, with the possible exception of Iraq 1963. And that one is tricky to figure out exactly what happened or what Kennedy actually authorized. But under LBJ, you have the Vietnam War unleashed. You also have the bloodiest, most horrific Nazi-level atrocities in Indonesia, where they kill 1 million, maybe 3 million. They just massacre people in order to make Indonesia into a client state and allow Standard Oil and Freeport Sulphur, a Rockefeller company, to have access to vast amounts of gold and oil in Indonesia. You have a reversal of policies in Congo, which is one of the most resource-rich places in the world. You have the approval of a coup in 1964 in Brazil. So you have a coup in Greece. Basically, LBJ just unleashes these imperialist forces that JFK had been trying to restrain. And so you can see a big change in policy. And RFK Jr.'s campaign, I think that the U.S. empire is collapsing as we speak. And I don't really think it's necessarily likely that there's going to be much of a change in the U.S. establishment, because they seem to be all in on empire till the end. But I think what RFK Jr. is doing is important, because he's putting the empire back at center stage. That's why they don't even want to say he's running an anti-empire campaign and an anti-corporate corruption campaign. They just want to call him anti-vaxxer, even as he says that I support vaccination and I just want it to be safe and free of conflicts of interest. Whatever you think about him on that issue, it's ridiculous that they're mischaracterizing his campaign and his position in this way. But I think it's because the empire really is what the U.S. is. And it had been, established in the wake of World War II, all through the Eisenhower years, and Kennedy inherited a mess in this military-industrial complex. He tried to rein these forces in, and eventually he realizes that the Cold War is a disaster, and he calls for a speech. He gives a speech calling for an end to the Cold War, a space program with the Soviets. He signs a treaty to reduce nuclear weapons testing, calls for complete disarmament of nuclear weapons. And then as soon as he dies, Johnson is not going to continue these policies. And RFK and Jackie send a messenger to Moscow saying the quest for peace is going to have to wait because of Johnson. He's too close to big business. He's too warlike. But when RFK gets back to the White House, it'll begin again. But RFK never makes it back to the White House. So there is a certain kind of dramatic appeal to what RFK Jr. is trying to do. But whatever you believe about the Kennedy administration, the fact is the empire and what RFK Jr. is calling for is absolutely essential and necessary if you have any, respect for human life and human prosperity, and you're against imperialism and murderous thuggery, then you have to oppose the U.S. empire, because MLK said we're the biggest force for violence in the world. It was true then, and it's true now, and it needs to stop. And this is the bigger issue. It's more important than, magic bullets and so on.